Hey, this is Sydney, and I am here to talk us through the astrology of September 17th through the 23rd, 2025. It has been a doozy of a previous week, and we are going to continue to go through it for this week as well, with a partial solar eclipse happening on the 21st. So we are still very much inside of the solar eclipse season portal. And I know that collectively, individually, everybody's really going through it. I do want to remind folks, especially if you have mutable placements at the end of degrees, like in that 27, 28, 29, we should probably be very, very cognizant and very curious about what this eclipse season is bringing us, and especially in what houses that this eclipse is going to be straddling, even though it is essentially a new moon because it is close to the node. That is what makes it a eclipse. And so it automatically involves the other node because they are in an axis, an opposition. And so we should pay attention to what parts of life that's lighting up for us in our life. So yeah, times are a changing. Let's see, basic housekeeping. This is where I record now. Puppies on the ground or wanting to crawl over me on the couch means that now I just have to sit in my office and do it. So the recording quality isn't as cute. Maybe one day when I have more money, I'll be able to fix that issue, but that's just not the case. I'm open for readings. My website is ddAstrology.com. You can just schedule online, or if there's any issues with those times, you can always reach out to me separately. All right, I think that's all I want to really say about this particular part, and let's skip into the next segment. So let's orient ourselves into time and space as we go through this week. We just need to remember some of the kind of big key things that are going on here. If I look over to the side, it's because my chart is there, and I will also be putting the chart up on the screen for you as well, so you'll be able to orient yourself. I'm just not going to do it via Zoom. I'm just going to edit it in because it's just, anyways, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we still have Pluto and Uranus. They're both retrograde. They are very, very close to their trine. And so we are seeing kind of deep, systemic, fundamental shifts in culture, in communication and technology. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of stuff around AI is happening right now. Um, and the systemic changes that have to do with society and revolution, you don't have to go far or search very far, various parts of our world right now, to see that things are popping off everywhere, right? In Europe, in Asia, here in America, where I am. So first and foremost, I think we just need to orient ourselves into understanding that that is a fundamental thing that is going to be happening for quite a long time. Secondly, Pluto is out of bounds. We'll be going in and out of bounds until 2035. I've been talking about this for a while. So have some other astrologers, and especially the astrologer Rosie Finn. So I want to give credit where credit is due. If you are interested in her work, which I think is absolutely fascinating, and I believe that she studied this, this was like her project for like about 2 decades. Um, I highly recommend you going and seeking out her work. She has various things online that you can watch. She also has a book. There's that. Okay. Other things that we have going on. Yesterday, we had a very, very emotional day with Chiron. I am recording this on the day that we're having an emotional day with Chiron. So I'm recording this on Tuesday, September 16th. And yeah, the last 24 hours have been kind of a doozy. It's been a lot, and there's more in store. So as we come into Wednesday, I think we might all be feeling a little bit raw or very aware of those around us that are feeling raw as well. I think that kind of orients us. I mean, there's so much going on, but I think those are kind of the good starting points for us to move forward into the week. All right, so let's talk about Wednesday, September 17th. Wednesday is Mercury's day. We still have Mercury in Virgo, really kind of wrapping up its time here, right? Before it goes into the sign that will be leading this eclipse that is about to come up on the 21st. Mercury has been in a sign that craves analysis and detail, paying attention to all of the minutia and being able to separate out the things that we don't need from the things that we do need. It's a sign, Virgo, that is said to be a little bit more protected when it is under the beams or combust because it's in its sign of domicile and also exaltation. And I hope that that is true. I really hope that during this period of time that you have maybe taken the initiative to create some systems that really make sense in how you want to get things done and do the sort of work and service that you are doing. Now, today is a big day for Mercury because at 10:47 we are going to get the opposition from Mercury to retrograde Saturn in Pisces at 28 degrees and 46 minutes. Now, this opposition is interesting to me because it is an opposition that Mercury is going through. And then later on this week, the sun and the moon are also going to be making these oppositions that have to do with the solar partial eclipse. And this eclipse is ruled by Mercury. So it's almost as if Mercury goes toe to toe with Saturn. It's like, let's refine even more. Let's really find all of the boundaries and borders of what is right here. There is almost like an exploration of a limit in some sort of way. There's definitely, I think we know that there's been a lot of very serious conversations online between what is right speech, free speech, who should be limited, who should not. We've been seeing a lot of people getting, zinged and dinged, including losing their jobs for exercising their speech, their free speech. And certainly people lose their lives because they were exercising their free speech. So I think more and more, and especially on this day, there's kind of maybe a culmination because it is an opposition and awareness point of where these conversations are going and what they're doing, and perhaps even like their effect on our culture and society at large. I do think that this day in particular, Wednesday, right, is going to feel like we're kind of moving and grooving a bit. We do have a beautiful trine from the moon to Neptune, retrograde Neptune in Aries. It's in fire sign, so it kind of allows us to feel like, emotionally passionate and, connecting with our intuition and creativity. Considering what was going on Tuesday, I think that this kind of lets us like tap into kind of a deeper process and hopefully in a little bit more of a spiritual way. Though who knows what kind of wounds were opened on Tuesday with that wild little opposition between Chiron and Aries going on. So there's that. Sorry, Mars and Chiron. We have the moon sextile and retrograde Uranus in Gemini. That's going to be in the middle of the night, 12:52 a.m. So, this is really going to allow us to easily make different habitual shifts, right? New ways of feeling and being. Maybe a new way to integrate the ways that we have been feeling. 1:05 a.m., moon opposite retrograde Pluto. Now, this is some sort of emotional confrontation that is hopefully forcing some sort of elimination. You know, this can have to do with like pride, right? Or moon in Leo really needs recognition. It needs to be poured back into, and maybe there is some sort of emotional realization that not all of the uh safety and security that we need can actually be gotten from external sources, and we need to pour in. So there is an elimination moment here, an awareness of what we potentially need to get rid of here in order for us to be better fulfilling. And it still feels really intense. So if you wake up feeling kind of intense, that's really what that like debris is from this, the moon kind of going through it in the middle of the night in the morning. Then we have that Mercury opposing retrograde Saturn in Pisces that we spoke about, or that I spoke about just a little bit earlier in this particular section. Um, I do think that thoughts become more serious and a little bit more sobering, and we're finding our limit. We're finding the boundary. We are finding and needing to maybe be a little bit more. We need to get really real about how we're communicating. For me, like when I kind of step into that energy, that sounds, I'm trying to like be a little bit more pragmatic and not so like spiritual about things, but it really does feel like, no, but like how I communicate needs to be real and centered in truth and pieces of information that can be like quantified. I think about like that Mercury in Virgo sort of thing. And Saturn in Pisces really is like, okay, we're trying to put some sort of limit, some sort of border on the most nebulous parts of things, and for better or for worse. So I think this is an awareness of needing to get very like down to brass tacks about how we are communicating and thinking. It's almost like we have to stop playing games here. It's, anaretic. It's at the very last degrees that this opposition is happening, which also speaks to some sort of like ending happening here, a culmination. It's like a culmination of a culmination, an ending of an ending, like for real this time. That's kind of what it feels like. We're going to get the moon quintiling retrograde Uranus and Gemini. I really do think that this is going to be some sort of, I don't know, it's just like new emotion, new thought. There's like a freshness in here. So it's like we kind of sober up about what we're thinking, and then we're able to kind of like maybe feel in a new kind of intuitive way. At the very end of the day, 11:16 p.m., we are going to get a sesqui square from the moon to retrograde Saturn. So this is just cranky. This is feeling, really very, very uncomfortable, psychologically uncomfortable, not really. You can't really quite fit into the skin. Maybe there's some sort of limit that like they really, really don't love, and you're trying to kind of push through. And just know that because the moon does move pretty fast, this aspect will pass in a couple hours time. So just try to go to bed early. And then we'll slide into the next day. Thursday, September 18th is Jupiter's day. We still have Jupiter in Cancer. He is in his own cute little terms, which is great. And I think that in general, if we can all just like lean on Jupiter a little bit to bring us a little sense of hope, expansion, and also a bit of like, I don't know, like emotional and intuitive curiosity, like a desire to kind of expand our emotional horizons a little bit, to do a little bit of that work would be great. I don't know if that's really going to happen though. So here we are. So Thursday, we are going to get Mercury's ingress into Libra, and that's going to happen at 3:05 a.m. This is a really busy day. This is a busy day. When Mercury goes into Libra, We end up in the sign of the diplomat, of the compromise, of thinking, in ways that kind of allow for, this person's perspective and this person's perspective. It is, kind of trying to find the harmony or the meeting point. It is definitely a Mercury that is more diplomatic, right? There could be a codependency of thought, whether it's, you know, asking people, hey, but like, what do you think? And then kind of attaching your thoughts in order to be in connection with them. This is a sign, with Mercury that can speak to really being more collaborative and sharing of thoughts and processes as well. Definitely trying to find the harmonizing position, for better or for worse, right? I love Libra placements, but also there can be a little bit of a wishy-washiness that can happen, where Mercury and Virgo can be very analytical and critical. Now there's a little bit of a correction in that, like, oh, okay, let's take everybody's, thoughts and feelings into consideration here. Um, yeah. So we get Mercury's ingress into Libra. Is now also in the sign, basically in the place that is going to be ruling over this eclipse that is going to be coming up on the 21st. So it's like Mercury is doing the work before the sun and the moon get to these points, right? He had that opposition with Saturn. He goes into Libra. They're going to have the sun and the moon will have the opposition in Saturn, and then they'll also go into Libra. So it's like Mercury's kind of literally the messenger going forth before saying like, hey, I'll get some information about what this like ultimately means. 4:33 a.m. we're going to get Venus and Leo quincunx retrograde Saturn. This is going to be happening at 28 degrees and 43 minutes. There's some sort of adjustment that needs to be had. It feels uncomfortable, and it could be a forced adjustment around our values, our principles of beauty and femininity. We do know that there's been a lot of stuff, like a lot of news and information coming up around, how people feel about gender and femininity. This could also have something to do with money, but I really do actually think that this particular quincunx has to do with our feelings and adjustments that we have to make around that principle of yin, like receptive energy, feminine energy, the idea of gender. There's something about gender here, the fluidityness of it, or lack thereof for some people, and having to kind of change perspective in some sort of way around that. In any given case, if you can hear my dog snoring, I'm sorry. But in any case, there is an adjustment here that is being made that also could possibly feel like some sort of ending as well because of the last degrees. This is the last degrees before Venus goes into the sign of her fall. She's not happy. Um, it's just like a forced adjustment. And then she's like, oh, now I'm here. At 12:13 p.m., we're going to get the sun in Virgo, quincunx retrograde, Chiron in Aries. And this feels pretty unpleasant. I think this feels pretty like a soreness, a little bit of a wound. Maybe we were a little bit too overcorrecting and self-critical, and now we have like kind of hurt ourselves. So, we know that we've kind of been run through the gauntlet early on this week emotionally. So certainly there's some sort of like a ego thing happening that we need to make some sort of adjustment for as well. 3 p.m. So Mercury went into Libra and now it has this opposition with retrograde Neptune in Aries. This can be some sort of confusing dialogue, perhaps, with another person, uh, you know, kind of being either like taken advantage of or feeling disillusioned or thinking disillusioned thoughts, right? Confusion. It's almost like we go into this more compromising place and then we're met with like a wall of confusion, Neptune. This can also make us like really creative. Like it can if we do it well. So try to think clearly, but also know that we're probably not thinking very clearly and to just kind of maybe chill out in that energy and try to use it for a creative thing and not for an actual like constructive, formal, critical thing because I don't think that anybody's really kind of seeing or thinking things clearly right then. Good time for creativity, but like write it down. Right, good for poetry, perhaps. Write it down and then come back to it after this opposition clears up and go, okay, like what is actually usable here? We're going to get Mercury, then we'll trine that retrograde Uranus and Gemini. It's like we have this confusion. And then 9:52 p.m., we get this trine to Uranus and Gemini, and it's like conversational. We're having new conversations about like technology and information and, how we use that information. Certainly can have to do with like some sort of thing having to do with AI. Um, but it feels fast. It feels fresh. It feels very creative. I really like the trine. I'm always going to be very interested to see like what happens whenever Mercury comes up into a Ptolemaic aspect with Uranus during Uranus's ingress or in being inside of Gemini. But this is like new thought, new communication, you know, new ways of connecting with other people. So that I like that aspect. In fact, I think that aspect is the one that I would try to use more and less if I had to have some sort of conversation that I didn't know how it was necessarily going to go, but I wanted there to be some sort of like almost like problem solving. 10:07 p.m., we're going to have the moon in Leo, trying that retrograde Chiron in Aries. So it could be that like whatever wounds or, hurts that we've been kind of acutely working on over the last couple of days, we finally get into a little bit of a resolved place, an empathetic place for ourselves. Uh, safer place, or we're just able to really confront or be in engagement with that sort of space without it being super painful, but there's like a flow. It's almost like you can go into the hurt and be in an understanding about what you need to do at 11:26 p.m. Then we get Mercury and Libra trine retrograde Pluto in Aquarius, and like now like we're getting deep with it. So I love the evening for all Mercury things, all of the things around thinking and processing and communicating really seem to take on this like new, fresh, deeper, more intense, more investigative. And also, certainly with that Mercury trine retrograde Pluto, there could be some sorts of information coming up at this time, some sorts of, secrets coming up because we have Mercury in a harmonious aspect with the god of secrets, right? The god of what's super deep under there. So I'd be very interested to see kind of what is kind of coming up in the news, things that we all need to know. That seems like it's about that time. Friday, September 19th is Venus's day, and we have Venus entering Virgo today, the sign of her fall. unfortunately. So where she had maybe some like mixed dignity, kind of able to do the things that Venus really loves to do and feels good doing, now she becomes a little bit more finicky, critical, kind of picking on things, the perfectionist, the perfection of beauty. One of the I kind of love Venus and Virgo. I don't try to hate on really any placements of planets and signs, certainly, because they can all be these wonderful expressions in certain ways. And we all have to love our planets that are in fall or in detriment as well. But one of the most famous Venus and Virgo folks that just makes so much sense is Martha Stewart, right? Her idea is like perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. There's this like supercut of her um in her documentary of her saying perfect. And it's just so perfect. Um, so let's use this energy to maybe look at our space, right? Venus, the decorator, and to make it more perfect. Now, let's not get kind of mired in the super details of it all. Let's not try not to do the hard thing about Venus and Virgo, which is getting too critical and too nitpicky that it just like doesn't get done, or we feel a little bit like paralyzed in being able to make any sort of choices. But like this is, the fine tuning of things, right? This is a super fine detailed work, right? This like feels like fiber arts. This feels like rhinestoning with the tiniest of rhinestones, like one at a time, ever so patiently making the most beautiful mosaic that you could make that's almost perfect. So that being said, Venus is going to enter Virgo at 5:39 a.m. The moon is kind of going through it today. So I really do think that for all purposes, this day is kind of like a lot emotionally. And with Venus also going into the sign of her fall, it's almost a little bit like the fun gets a little bit sucked out of the room. Moon's gonna sextile Mars and Libra, get stuff done. 1:39 a.m. though. We're all sleeping. But there could be, it's like a quickening, that kind of feeling. We're gonna get the Moon quincunx retrograde Saturn in Pisces. This just feels like some sort of maybe anxiety, pressure around all of the things and tasks that you need to get to do, and there's just like not enough time. It's a little bit like the blues kind of trying to settle in there, and you needing to make some sort of emotional adjustment around all of the things and the goals that you want to get done. Um, we are going to get the moon conjunct Venus in Leo right before Venus goes into Virgo. And it's kind of like, love me kind of moment before the crush. Uh, it's interesting because it's like the moon conjuncts Venus and Leo at 29 degrees 59. So there's like something like emergent, something critical, some sort of crisis that has to do with, themes of femininity, women, value, and maybe our emotional ties to it. And then the moon goes into Virgo, right? Gets worried, um, gets far more psychological. It's definitely this like processing moon. And then we in service oriented, self-critical, analytical, like all of those things. But now we're like emotionally doing it. We're emotionally processing. We're processing our feelings through a critical lens. um, Moon and Virgo can also be very healing too, so I don't want to speak too ill of a Moon in Virgo, but it's definitely can be a little bit of a tummy ache. And then right after that, Venus enters Virgo, which we already talked about. 7 a.m., the Moon is going to quincunx retrograde Neptune. A little bit of a like nebulous confusion. Maybe we need to make some sort of emotional adjustment, right? The moon, emotions, or a habitual adjustment around our vision, around our dream, Neptune, or around the things that we've been disillusioned by or been confused by. Then we have the moon square retrograde Uranus in Gemini. This can be some sort of emotional shock. This can be, suddenly changing. So, like the mood just changes, kind of goes sideways, a little bit of electricity in the room. This can also be a little bit of like feeling emotionally traumatized. It is interesting because it's kind of like it's more psychological in a sort of way. We're going to get the moon quincunx retrograde Pluto. We kind of are thrust deep into some sort of a obsessive change. We have to change something that we are kind of obsessed with. Um, and then at 7:42 p.m., it's like we go through this gauntlet, like this emotional gauntlet, and like things are really going through it. And we get this really lovely, not Ptolemaic aspect, but we get Mercury quintil Jupiter. It's like right brain, left brain. And it feels like all of a sudden, in how we are able to kind of mentally process or intellectualize and like theorize kind of gels into this like synthesis, and we've kind of become this like jack of all trades, and maybe like the ideas and conversations we have are not just full of information but also full of wisdom. It's like this expansive of thought. I like this cute quick aspect. 10:20 p.m. Venus in Virgo is going to quincunx, retrograde Neptune in Aries. It's interesting, like interesting energy. I do think that our values are undergoing a shift in how they can maybe orient themselves and sort in like inside of our vision, the vision that we have of like being first and the most important and like being, with our identity. Venus and Virgo is like, let's fine tune that actually. Like this vision of yourself, like we need it to be more perfect. Um, and so there could be just some sort of unsettling feelings around the things that we value, certainly around relationships, could be take on this like kind of unsettling, uncomfy little space. So just kind of try to feel it out. Try not to make any immediate adjustments because I think some of the confusion or the delusion or the disillusionment of it needs to kind of clear before we make those really big shifts. And then we're going to get Mars quincunx retrograde Saturn in Pisces at 2023. Again, this feels like frustrating in the ways that you were trying to move, get things done, do your tasks, right? All of a sudden there's some sort of limit or boundary that like you have to like uh, make some sort of change with, or you have to like utilize, and you're not loving it, right? Things kind of feel hard, they feel challenged. And certainly with Mars still being in Libra and Saturn being in Pisces, they're like Saturn really wants to put some sort of limit in how like nebulous and flowing things are. And Mars just wants to take some sort of action, but it doesn't really know what action to take because it's Mars and Libra. It could go either way, right? And so this feels like I want to do something, but I feel limited by this thing that isn't working for me, and I feel really frustrated. So just know that if frustration starts to really kind of set in the evening, that's just what the planets are really, really trying to do for us right now, unfortunately. Saturday, September 20th is Saturn's day. Saturn is a major player in these next couple of days. Saturn is retrograde in Pisces. An interesting thing about the Saturn and Pisces story is that we're seeing a lot of conversation about immigration. Who belongs here? Who doesn't? What are the borders and limits of the places that we live, the countries that we're in? And we're watching a lot of argument and weird, horrific, quite frankly, um, tactics to control immigration and people that we consider foreigners coming into our spaces. So it's just an interesting reflection or something that we can think about today is like um, what are we really trying to do here? Like what is the overall impact if every place stops immigration, if every place stops allowing other people into their spaces, what does that mean for community? What does that mean for art? What does that mean for love? What does that mean for trade? What does that mean for humanity? It's just a meditation to have, I think. Today. Anyways, at 8:41 a.m. we get Venus in Virgo, square retrograde Uranus and Gemini. This is an opening square. This is a crisis of awareness. This is a shock, right? And a change that we need to be very flexible for. I don't think that we have any awareness of really what this means. We also, because of that, the Venus story, Venus being in Virgo, it also has a quincunx to Pluto simultaneously. So it's not great. I don't think that we have any idea about the ways that we need to make adjustments to how we do money, that we do value, um, the ways that we see women and femininity uh, really need to shift here. This can be some sort of trauma and shock around women in general. This can be a financial thing too, certainly. Um, yeah, it can be exciting, electrifying. This is an instability that is kind of brought up for us around all Venusian things. Um, Venus in Virgo to me also, just like as an archetype, is the maiden. It's the young woman. And that Pluto Uranus trine, it's like maybe bringing up secrets. That Pluto Venus quincunx is making some sorts of adjustments and maybe to how we take care of young women. Um, it is a very spicy little configuration that there's like a psychological adjustment between Venus and Pluto. There is a crisis of awareness between Venus and Uranus, with Venus being this faster planet. It's the one that is doing the adjustment, the change, and having the changes pressed upon it. So fun. Anyways, then we get the moon is going to Sept square retrograde Pluto, 12:36 p.m. This just really feels like an emotional crisis. And quite frankly, like some sort of like obsessive churning, and not really being able to fully get to the bottom of it. So if you're feeling really like anxious isn't really quite the word. Mm, emotionally frustrated, maybe. It's really complicated energy in the afternoon. Here we are, that's happening for you. We are going to then, and not, this energy is going to kind of, I think, free float through the evening, 9:33 p.m. We get the moon sextile Jupiter in Cancer. Here is a opportunity to kind of do some self-soothing, clean your house, tidy up, um, maybe engage in like make soup. That's what that feels like. Moon sextile Jupiter in Cancer feels like make soup. But there is, with Moon Jupiter contacts, especially the easy flowing ones, there's like a conversation that is happening. that feels like a little bit of an indulgence. And so I think there's a like indulge in the things that make you feel safe at home. It could be a feel good aspect, but I don't think that this is particularly a feel good aspect because of the things that have been going on earlier in the day. It can only offer so much of a balm. And then at 10:45 p.m., we're going to get the sun opposing retrograde Saturn in Pisces at 28 degrees and 30 minutes. And this is the opposition that happens that is keyed into the eclipse, the partial solar eclipse that is happening tomorrow. So it's almost as if, and really, I think that the eclipse energy, besides it being eclipse season, so we've just kind of been in this, right? Really, really started when Mercury had its opposition to Saturn. It went, this is where this particular eclipse really begins. And then as the moon entered its phase of like being balsamic, really kind of closing down, sun's going down, big guy. We're trying to like wrap up something here. So the sun opposing retrograde Saturn in Pisces, I mean, one, it's like responsibility kind of being placed on you, right? It can feel like the ego is being suppressed. Certainly, if we want to look at the sun in a chart being about leadership, soul, there's some sort of limit being placed upon it, maybe some sort of tampering down. And this could be like a halt in vitality, a stop, an awareness of one's physical ability to do something, right? Also, some sort of like culmination. This is a full moon energy with the sun and Saturn being in an opposition. Oppositions have the nature of Saturn, which is to limit, to create borders, to create an awareness, to make something real. Um, it's at the last degrees. There's like a stop here. That's what it feels like. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a stop. Maybe it's unchecked ego, right? But this energy continues into the next day with the solar eclipse. So there's something here. Um, it's like pressure. There's a pressure of some sort. Yeah. Sunday, September 21st is the sun's day, and we have a solar partial eclipse at 29 degrees and 5 seconds, Virgo. This is when I looked at the chart for this, I was like, oh man, this is a lot. And I'm pretty sure that any astrologer that you're listening to right now is like, this is a really intense time to be alive and a really intense energy to see in a chart. 29 degrees in 5 seconds. Virgo is the very, very last moments of these planets, the lights being in the sign of Virgo. So there is a ending thing here. However, the new moon also says new beginnings, but we cannot have a new beginning without an ending, which is also something that we need to keep in mind here as well. The partial solar eclipse is at the south node, which also means releasing, right? And so again, we have these ideas of something must be let go of in order to start anew. But the releasing and the newness are intertwined and they cannot be separated from each other. And also the ending of something as well. And we did have that full moon eclipse, right, that happened at that 0 degrees. Absolutely bananas, honestly. This whole eclipse moment for the last few weeks, just bananas, bananas. Good, you know? This solar eclipse is going to be happening in the 14th mansion. I like the mansions of the moon. I just think that they give little nuances of information. The Mansions of the Moon book that I use is Christopher Warnock. Oh, it's somewhere. This book, Mansions of the Moon. And it is the mansion of the unarmed, also named Al-Samak or Azimek, depending on whether it's the Picatrix or the Arabic word for it. I think I did get it. Yes. Yeah, in Arabic, the 14th mansion is Al-Samak. There we go. And then in the Picatrix, it's Azimek or Azimech. Hmm. Anyways, things that we need to know, the keywords are severance, breaking apart of restrictive and inappropriate bonds, and disillusion. So that's another indication that there's some sort of culmination, or not culmination, an ending, a release, south node, and then a new thing. And we're also talking about eclipses. And with the solar partial eclipse, neither of the lights are bright. The sun is being eclipsed. And so when we think about eclipses, and they've always been tied to like kings and dynasties, people in power, the sun also, which is symbolizes like those in rule, those in power, are being eclipsed by the moon being the people. The moon and the sun are both in the sign of Virgo. The moon being in the sign of Virgo could speak to like the everyday workers, the everyday people, right? Eclipsing the sun. So when the sun's light goes out during an eclipse, especially a south node eclipse, I would think there creates issues for those in power. So it'll be very interesting to see what further issues, because we've already been in eclipse season, this energy has been happening, come up for those who are in power. The sun and moon are conjunct the fixed star Alcade. This is the star of female mourners, and it's related to mass sorrow and also denotes change. So here we have another little bing on the chart for change. Saturn opposes this lunation, right? So we have the South Node, new moon, partial solar eclipse, you know, uh, being opposed by Saturn, which is like creating some sort of limit, awareness of a limit. This also can have to do with like relationships. There's an issue with relationships. Something has to be released, and we are now at the end. We're now at the end of it. And the moon and the sun having already made its opposition to Saturn, and now it is in a full aspect to Saturn, says that like it's not an anxious, almost coming to fruition sort of opposition. This is an awareness so we can go do something about it. Opposition. This is a difference between a gibbous and a full opposition. Saturn is conjunct the fixed star Sheet. Sheet, Sheat, is a nasty little star. This is a star of misfortune. Definitely has something to do with water, drowning. And it's always said to have, well, not always, at least in some of the sources that I looked up, because I love fixed stars and I'm always like trying to kind of understand a little bit more about them. But this star in particular tends to behave a little bit more naughtily when it is in a configuration to a malefic, like Saturn. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any sort of, especially in, Saturn and Pisces, uh, more stuff around water. We certainly have had the Saturn and Pisces area has been lots of weird stuff with water, right? We saw as soon as Saturn went right back into Pisces, we had all those containers tumbling, losing, who knows how many millions or even billions worth of material. We've had boats sink. We had that Titanic boat earlier when Saturn was in Pisces explode under the water. Lots of water stuff, right? We've had, so it would be interesting to see if there's some water stuff that happens, especially around everyday workers, everyday people that work, in our blue collar. It feels like there's something there too. What else do I have on my notes? Yeah, sheet. Sheet is sheet. Both the sun and the moon are in the bounds of Saturn, also about endings. Do, do, do. It's also a big old kite pattern in this, right? And so it's like whatever events are a reflection or a culmination of like this period of time really sets us into a new trajectory. And so we have to take into account all of the other things that are kind of at play here, right? With Pluto and Uranus in a trine. We have Neptune in there. Saturn's still very close to Neptune. We can't say that they are not having some sort of conversation. It's just not perfect yet. And then this lunation, the sun and the moon are at the tail of the kite. Like this is the thing that kind of sets everything into motion, that kind of thing. It feels poignant, it feels prominent. Other things about this lunation, this chart, is that Mars is anaretic for it. Mars is sitting at this very critical, like kind of violent moment, right? He's about to go into Scorpio where he is going to immediately square Pluto. So I think that this period of time as well, because they're within the 3 degrees, is also there is something about violence here. There's something about hurt and pain. God, sounds so tragic. It could be. It could be. It can also be, some sort of action is taken. It's a closing square that um, causes us to kind of step up and take action, right? For moon, the people to really like eclipse the sun, those in power to take back our own power and do something about the injustices of the world. So there could be that. Oh, yep, lunation ruled by Mercury in Libra, about diplomacy, about peace, about the sorts of like deals you make with other countries, right? Other people, the sorts of legal agreements that we make. There are 2 yods. Venus is at the apex of one of the yods, and Mars is at the apex of another yod for this eclipse. So we know that Venus has some sort of critical thing about it, being at a yod with Pluto and Neptune. And then Mars has something here too, being at the apex of a yod with Saturn and Uranus about to square Pluto. This is a very intense, critical moment, I think, in time. And then after all of this, the moon is going to enter Libra. It's going to say, okay, but oh, I want to connect. I need to like be in relationship. We need to figure out what's going on. Become social. Um, that's at 2:40 p.m. Not that it matters because we're going to be in eclipse energy until the next lunation. And I'm very interested to see in the days around this period of time of the 21st, really what ends up kind of rearing its head because we have so many things that have already just perfected and are now kind of releasing that tension or about to hit their perfect, very challenging energy and have some sort of thing happen. So we're in a very shifty time. Be very careful with your bodies. Be very, very careful with your hearts. Be very careful around how you express yourself in relationships. and the sorts of values that you have. With all new and full moons, especially eclipses, there is a advice to rest if you can. Monday, September 22nd is the moon's day. We have the moon in Libra, really wanting to relate, to make harmony and peace. I do love a moon in Libra. It's like needing to be in relationship, conversation, communication with others in order to feel a sense of harmony. 12:54 a.m. though, we have Mars entering Scorpio. Mars entering Scorpio is now in the sign that he is very comfortable in, is in the sign of his domicile. And he's now in the sign of the sniper. When I think about Mars and Scorpio and how Mars and Scorpio moves, it slowly and deliberately creates the plan of attack and then does it without even maybe uttering a word, right? Mars and Scorpio is a laser beam, whereas Mars and Aries is maybe like more of a just a shot wherever it goes. Doesn't even it's not even aiming. It's just I'm gonna shoot because I felt, right? Mars and Scorpio sees the target and it does what it needs to do. As soon as Mars enters Scorpio, it is now absolutely, and it was even yesterday, applying to a square with Pluto, which means volatility. This can mean violence. This can mean aggression. This can mean popping off, right? This can certainly mean issues with anger and violence. We need to all be very, very careful about what we let fill up to spill over. It's like a crisis point of anger almost. We get Moon conjunct Mercury in Libra. This is a chatty, a chatty moment, being able to like know how we're feeling and to be able to like verbally express that. But maybe there's a little bit of criticalness there. And I say that because the moon and Mercury are ruled by that Venus in Virgo, which is like, it's not perfect. It needs to be perfect. Let's make it perfect. So there could be a little bit in having these conversations with other people wanting to connect. Maybe we share something we shouldn't have. We maybe should have locked back a little bit, especially because Mars is applying this square to Pluto. At 11:19 a.m., we get the sun entering Libra. This is the sign of her fall, unfortunately. The sun, which is like this principle of like I amness, of oneness, of me-ness, now is in a sign that says, but like we-ness, you and me-ness, us-ness, right? And that's a space where, you know, now this is the season of like connectivity with others, of conversation, the sun now is in the sign of diplomacy, of sharing, of unifying, of harmonizing, of also codependency. It is the sign of relationship, connection. So we do have this sort of energy, playing in the background with the ingress of the sun into Libra, and also fall, right? Welcome to fall. Happy birthday, Libra. Um, you just have some like kind of intense energy with this like I mean, not moon, Mars Pluto situation happening that could be like anger bottling up from the recesses or from deep down inside. Especially as we're trying to like make good and make peace, make love, make harmony, and maybe we're not getting our way because like really the love principle is a little bit dry right now. She's in Virgo, you know. Venus in Virgo is like picking on her lover. Why don't you cut your hair? You look better when it's like this. I wish you would do this. That's kind of what a Venus in Virgo can do. Also can like make people look better. Like that's like a makeover queen. Um, you're my partner. I'm gonna help you look better, but that could mean that your partner ends up feeling a little bit picked on in the end of things. And then some of the anger and aggression can bottle up. Be very, very cautious about how you use your energy and your will. Be very, very cautious about who you decide that you want to be arguing with or having any sort of issue with because of that Mars being in Scorpio. You never know how people are going to move, and they may not tell you before they do it. Tuesday, September 23rd is Mars's day. Mars is in Scorpio. Mars is quietly fired up, passionate, aggressive, but not in that way that is like overt, right? This is covert. This is the sniper. This is the planner, right? Mars is applying that square to Pluto, so we just need to remember that this energy continues. And it's also because Pluto is retrograde, they're mutually applying this square, which I think even kind of really, really is like bottling up this energy. Be careful of how you use your energy. Be careful of how you use your bodies. This could be a violent time, whether it is suddenly for some sort of reason, Pluto, Uranus, trine moment, and also Pluto and Pluto Mars square. And then Mars is in a quincunx to Uranus. It's like sudden erratic stuff. So we have to remember that these energies are kind of happening simultaneously. Pluto is having this kind of adjusting, sudden breaking kind of energy with Uranus and Gemini, retrograde Uranus and Gemini, pardon me, while it's applying to this square with Pluto, which is like the aggression and the force. And then Pluto and Uranus are having this trine, which is like new and sudden flowing changes and shifts, especially in communication. Pluto and Uranus are in air signs. It has to do with like thought, communication, right? And Scorpio, Mars being in Scorpio has to do with like psychological things. Definitely has to do with a like intuitive feeling. And so there's some sort of there's a dynamism with this aspect that I think is surely going to bring out some interesting moments in time and in history for us. 5:53. Oh yeah, and also Mars, sorry, not to get ahead of myself, but Mars is going to quincunx Neptune, also some weird energy issues, maybe feeling a bit like don't know which way you want to go in order to like complete your goals, but you're like really, really fired up and you want to make a shift. Um, so it's yachty as well. Mars being critical at this critical anaretic degree, and certainly, quincunx with Neptune and Uranus. It's a yod. Mars is very important here. How we decide to utilize our anger and will and power here is important. Um, that pressure that is happening with that square to Pluto is very interesting. 5:53 a.m. Sun in Libra is going to oppose retrograde Neptune in Aries. Relationship signs. This can also be like a weird energies feeling very nebulous and confused, and maybe our energy or vitality is feeling very low. Maybe we're feeling a bit disillusioned or confused, spiritual, confused in relationships. Um, there's like a diffusion of energy kind of happening here too. It's a very strange. There's a it's strange. I think it's strange today. Strange and electric and a little bit angry. Well, not a little bit, probably a lot angry. and strange. This is a time for high strangeness. 9:01 a.m. we get the moon in Libra square Jupiter in Cancer. That just be very careful of overly doing anything, of overly indulging, of expressing yourself in ways that aren't actually pure or distilled. There's an overdoing energy here, and it's totally being pressed upon with all of these other energies as well. Uh, yeah, and we're gonna get a moon opposite retrograde Chiron in Aries. Ouch. Sensitive, very, 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 very sensitive about things, very, very on edge about the things that we are hurt by. Emotionally aware of what those things are, maybe wanting to do something about it, feeling pretty fired up, feeling pretty angry. I'm gonna go do something about it, right? But let's not, let's like slow our rolls. We're going to get the sun in Libra is going to trine retrograde Uranus in Gemini. This can certainly be some sort of like a new, fresh energy and idea, some sort of new thing around creativity and art and information coming up, an exciting little energy coming in. This creates a grand air trine between the sun, Pluto, and Uranus, which is cute, but also that flowing energy of like thought and information and communication just creates this like probably pretty fast circuit while these other things are playing out, while we're feeling sensitive, while we're feeling angry. 10:33 p.m. we get the moon quincunx retrograde Saturn in Pisces, having to make some sort of emotional adjustment and change around the things that we have to do, our goals, our limits. And then we get 11:04 p.m. Sun trine retrograde Pluto in Aquarius. This, this really kind of like fully locks out the grand air trine between the Sun, Pluto, and Uranus. So I think the circuit like then is just like really, really cooking with grease by the time we get to the evening. All that to say is I think this day feels like a lot. I think that this day feels like electricity, an idea, and very heady. Be cautious of your reactions on this day in particular. Hey, thank you for listening to today's Astro Weather with me. I'm Sydney. As a reminder, I'm always open to seeing both new and my beloved returning clients. My website is ddastrology.com. That is D as in dog, astrology.com to check me out and just click the email buttons in order to schedule with me. If you're into a more conversational feel with your podcast and content, I have a podcast called BS Astrology with my fellow Mercurial Mommy Bender, and we put out episodes every Sunday for the week. Just search BS Astrology on YouTube or wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts, including Spotify, Audible, and more. Have a good day.